Hi. Following the death of her husband Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, Mary Howard's father, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, put forward the idea that his daughter should marry the up-and-coming Thomas Seymour. But Mary wasn't keen. In hindsight, she had rather a lucky escape. Let me tell you more. This video has been inspired by a question sent to me by Sherry from Texas. Sherry asked, did the Tudor women who were tossed about as pawns to make advantageous marriages for their families ever refuse to cooperate with the marriage? And if so, what became of them afterwards? Well, I haven't had a chance to fully research this question, but one woman who refused to cooperate sprang to mind, and that was Mary Howard, daughter of Thomas Howard III, Duke of Norfolk, and his second wife, Elizabeth Stafford. Mary was also the sister of poet and courtier Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. Mary Howard was born in around 1519, and like many girls of her standing, she went to the royal court, and there, by September 1532, was attending on her cousin Anne Boleyn, both before and after Anne's marriage to the king. It appears to have been Anne who put forward the idea of Mary marrying Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, who was Henry VIII's illegitimate son by his mistress Elizabeth Blunt. A dispensation was issued for the marriage, as Fitzroy was descended from Queen Elizabeth Woodville, and Mary was descended from Elizabeth's sister, Catherine, Duchess of Buckingham. The couple married at Hampton Court Palace on the 26th of November 1533. The marriage was a political match rather than a love match, and it's not clear how the couple felt about it. They would, however, have expected their marriage to be arranged. After all, Fitzroy was the king's son, and Mary was the daughter of the premier family in England. It's also not clear if they even knew each other before their marriage. Historian Beverly A. Murphy points out that although Mary had been at court for several months before the marriage, Richmond had been away in France for most of that time. As they were only 14, the couple did not live together after their marriage, and they were not expected to consummate their union because of their youth. Henry VIII didn't want to risk the health of his son. Sadly, Fitzroy died in July 1536 at the age of just 17. A noble widow did have more autonomy than an unmarried noblewoman, but Mary was just 17, and the king wasn't playing ball regarding her jointure or her rights as Fitzroy's widow. She hadn't been left well off, and in fact had to wait until 1540 until her jointure was sorted out. In the meantime, the Duke of Norfolk obviously expected her to marry again and to make a good match. In July 1538, Ralph Sadler wrote the following to Thomas Cromwell. The day the king removed from Westminster to Hampton Court, the Duke of Norfolk made a suit to him touching the jointure of his daughter, the Duchess of Richmond, and spoke about her marriage, mentioning two persons, one being Sir Thomas Seymour. The king has spoken to Sir Thomas about it, and he, considering that Cromwell's son has married his sister, prefers him to have the meaning of the matter. The king desires him to speak to the Duke at some time convenient and soon, as the Duchess goes into the country tomorrow or next day. The other man the Duke is considering is unnamed, but Sir Thomas Seymour was the brother of Jane Seymour, the king's third wife and queen, who died in October 1537. The Seymours were in favour, and Norfolk thought it would be a good match for Mary. The king approved of the idea, and Seymour obviously wasn't against the match, but thought it better for Cromwell to negotiate it, as Cromwell's son Gregory was married to Seymour's sister Elizabeth. However, Mary was against it. Beverly A. Murphy explains that Mary remained determined to secure recognition of her status as Dowager Duchess of Richmond. She didn't want a second marriage to prevent her getting what was owed to her. 8 years later, in the summer of 1546, the Mary Seymour marriage idea was again put forward by Norfolk. but Seymour wasn't interested. 3 years earlier, Seymour had wanted to marry Catherine Parr, Lady Latimer as she was then. But the king had proposed to her, and Catherine felt she couldn't decline. Perhaps Seymour, knowing the king was in bad health, was waiting for Catherine. After all, marrying the Dowager Queen, and perhaps a woman who'd be regent for the new boy king, would be better than marrying the Duke of Norfolk's daughter. Mary wasn't interested either, and neither was her brother Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. Historian Susan Brigden writes of how Surrey had turned against the Seymour brothers, and he thought it might be better for Mary, her family and friends, if she actually became the king's mistress instead. Suffice to say that Mary was horrified by that idea. Mary never did remarry, and instead focused on bringing up Surrey's children after he was executed for treason in January 1547. She died in 1555 and was laid to rest next to Fitzroy in St Michael's Church, Framlingham. Thomas Seymour did marry Catherine Parr, marrying her secretly just a few months after Henry VIII's death in 1547. Why do I believe that Mary had a lucky escape by not marrying Thomas Seymour? Well, because although he appears to be a good-looking, charming and charismatic man, he went on to groom, and I'd go as far as saying sexually abuse, his wife's charge, the 14-year-old Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I. Then his jealousy over his brother's rise to Lord Protector, the bitterness that sprang from Catherine not being appointed regent, and he and Catherine not being seen as important, led him to the scaffold. His overreaching ambition, his desire to be the one influencing his nephew the king, his need to be someone important, led to him unravelling spectacularly after Catherine's death in September 1548. He seemed intent on marrying the king's sister Elizabeth, and he even broke into the king's apartments, allegedly shooting the king's barking dog. He was arrested on the 17th of January 1549 and stood accused of 33 counts of treason. He was beheaded on Tower Hill on the 20th of March. I wonder if Mary Howard breathed a sigh of relief that she hadn't been caught up in all that. I expect so. It was truly a lucky escape for her. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts about Mary Howard and this Seymour marriage idea. Take care. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.